Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and today I'm speaking with Craig Villarrubia, who I had the pleasure of meeting, I think in person for the first time I believe it was a Community Miracle Center conference in Las Vegas some years ago. And then a little more recently was in Estes Park at the um, Weekend of Freedom retreat. And Craig did all the videography there, and I want to thank you, Craig, for donating the video you did of the talk I gave there on humor in the course, because I put that on ACIM blog and had a lot of people enjoying that. And I just find so much humor in the course. And so anyway, that's very much appreciated. And I know you've done lots of other cool things with video, including some great documentaries. And you were one of the movers and shakers behind MiracleShare, which I think ran 3 seasons with you and Corinne Zepko and Danielle Scruton. And a lot of us participated in that, had a great time with that. So really a wonderful gift to the course community as well. And you're currently living on the Big Island. And you were just telling me about some of the interesting projects you've been working with how a wood lathe fell into your lap, and I was just looking at your website that talks about that. Maybe you could touch on that briefly before we go into other course things or whatever you want to talk about, really. But we try to keep it mostly course related, but it all, like we were just talking about, it all kind of feeds in, doesn't it? We're all using everything for mindfulness here, right? Yeah. So anyway, welcome, Craig.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the time with me. I'm looking forward to catching up and sharing this with everyone. So
Well, thank you for reaching out and coordinating this. And absolutely, it was such a joy to meet you along our paths. And I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation at the last event that we were at. I still laugh whenever I think of some of the things that you shared with the team. So I appreciate your humor, and I'm happy to join with you today.
great. So tell me a little bit about your course journey. Maybe that one might be a good place to start for people that may or may not be familiar with uh, your work, and how you got into the there must be a better way uh, alignment along with so many millions of others.
Yeah, I think that that's a great way to put it. There's got to be a better way. And I think a lot of us come into these spiritual teachings because we entertain that question. And for me, I've always felt there has to be a better way, even through my high school years and teenage years into my early adulthood. Not really knowing what that better way was, the question was always there. So I was always attracted to anything spiritual, because spirituality seemed to have some answers. And so whether we were talking about I remember reading the Celestine Prophecies or reading some of Eckhart Tolle's first books, they always kind of gave me or led me down a trail of insight. And eventually, A Course in Miracles would fall into my lap. Someone had mentioned the course or a quote from the course, and I was immediately touched by that quote and sought out the course book. And I often laugh when I share this story, because I immediately found the book, bought the book, and opened it up and kind of felt like, oh my God, this was like the biggest waste of $40, because I couldn't figure out anything the course was saying. And so it was just and I know this has happened for many people who've done the course. I put it down, and it sat on a coffee table. It moved with me as I moved residences. And I think it was a video that I had seen oh no, it was actually Gary Renard's book, The Disappearance of the Universe, that I bought that book not knowing it had anything to do with A Course in Miracles, and read the book. I'm like, wait, I think I own this book somewhere. And so sure enough, I found it. I'm like, oh, this is the one Gary's talking about. And that kind of opened up a deeper curiosity for A Course in Miracles. And then I would see a video, I think, of Marianne Williamson. So the symbols and the reflection I was experiencing was all leading me back to this A Course in Miracles. And so I spent, it was still difficult in the beginning, I felt, for me, to really understand what the course was about because of the language, the density of the text. But the support came from the course teachers that I had found on social media and on YouTube. And all of a sudden, it was just this huge curiosity that took over. And so my life was pretty much consumed with learning the course and figuring out what was there to experience. And so the application of course principles and certainly the lessons would lead to an experiential understanding of kind of what was being shared. And so that became eventually became the predominant way of living for me, and it continues to be for me, because I unequivocally feel that by adhering to these principles that are taught, my experience is much more peaceful, much more joyful, happier. And I think that's ultimately what we want. That was the original question, is there's got to be a better way. And for me, this is the way.
I can relate wholeheartedly to that. And for me, it was Gary's book in 2007 that sort of fell off the shelf at the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library, where I was doing some volunteer work as well as some paid consulting. And I flipped open the pages and met another colleague who's Mike Lemieux, aka Giddy Up Mikey, and he said, "Hey, are you reading that book? I just read it too," and something like that. Anyway, and then we discovered we had a common interest in the teachings, and so I had read the course several years earlier, and then plunged headlong back into it after that point, and then from there into Ken Wapnick's work and there's similar teachings that emphasize the pure non-dual nature of the course, and really taking it as far as we could go with it. And I think that's ultimately where we're all headed. And I'm learning more and more to be patient with myself and everyone, and just figure that we're all on our own trajectory to the oneness we never left. And if we can keep that in mind, we are more peaceful, aren't we? Yeah. So yeah, very, very similar kind of, the Gary Renard can opener story seems like a common theme for so many people, because, I'd read the book cover to cover, and somehow I had missed the God didn't make the universe part, or conveniently overlooked it. And then the other part is like, oh, it's all about forgiveness. And it's like, oh yeah, when you go back and reread it, if you had kind of gone through with as I did with either blinders or just kind of a mindset that was looking for something else, and when you go back and each time rereading, it just seems like it has more and more depth, doesn't it?
Yeah. It seems like, looking back at my experience and looking back on the path, the course started off as this very complex text and kind of complex solution, so to speak, to peace of mind. And now I look back at it, and it's clear to me that what I perceived as complex actually is very, very simple. And it comes back to that simple message that you said, which is forgiveness, which is really simple. However, because of the way we've been taught, it appears, or we perceive it, as very difficult. But the message or the teaching of A Course in Miracles is very, very simple and and arguably singular. And so I guess sometimes we have to kind of go through that journey to come to that recognition or realization that it is simple, but for whatever reason, it isn't easy.
Yeah, I think the simple but not easy is a pretty common theme too, that we hear from people who've been in the course a while, and realize that it's asking us to apply the principles on a deeper and deeper level all the time, until we've cleared away through forgiveness all the unconscious unfounded guilt. Yeah, I like the word singular. That's something I don't hear that often, but when you said singular, I was thinking it really is a singular simplicity, which almost sounds like a New York uh, musical melody. but yeah, it really is that really the ultimate simplicity, isn't it? That we just have one task, and that is to accept the atonement for ourselves, which is basically recognizing that nothing happened, but we need to look at what we think happened, um, and learn to withdraw our investment in the grievances around those things. And, and usually it's in a slow process, but over time, we start to generalize and realize, oh, well, I could not make a big deal about that too. I could forgive that also. And yeah. So in terms of the journey, I was thinking about how much fun those MiracleShare conferences were, and how much I enjoyed all the different connections made through those, as well as hearing what the other folks learning and studying and teaching in the course had to share, and thought maybe you might want to speak to that, and also and or your videography projects, because those I remember watching the movie that you'd made with a whole bunch of folks one evening, and I'd seen it before online, but it was fun to watch it as a group too, and just realize that the global community that you've helped connect is really a wonderful thing. And now with technology like Zoom, which used to be something that people like us would use pretty frequently, but the rest of the world's like, what's that? Now that's kind of been commonplace, and for example, I get on Zoom meetings, mostly course related, oftentimes 2 or 3 times a day. And so a lot of the things that weren't available, even just a few months ago now, are online in abundance. And it seemed like a lot of what you had done was, all fit into that pioneering foundation for recognizing that our community is really virtual and ultimately in the mind. And ideas don't leave their source, and we're all connected. But it's also kind of fun to track the progress and the interconnections, and all the kindred souls that we meet along the way that resonate with the course's message, and recognize we're all ultimately on that path. But maybe you could share a little bit about that experience, and what some of the anecdotes or things that you found interesting or helpful along the way with
Yeah, I
MiracleShare and your
think
videos. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think that's good to explore. I think we're all on our what we perceive as a path. And for me, it started, as I was sharing before, with this great curiosity and the decision to really jump into the A Course in Miracles world in a couple of different ways. One of which was to make a documentary, and it was done so definitely with his selfish desire, because I wanted to know so much about the course, that I wanted to meet those who had gone before me with the course. So different teachers, including Gary Renard, David Hoffmeister. These were very influential teachers in my kind of understanding and growth with the Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm.
So having that desire and that inspiration, with anything we do, whether we're doing a documentary, whether we're parenting, whether we are woodworking, with anything spiritual that we're inspired with, ultimately, in making the decision to go along that path or to pursue whatever it is we're inspired by, we are going to hit some unconscious beliefs, and that presents opportunities for us to explore and to heal and to forgive. So in my journey doing the movie, I had never done a movie before. I'd never picked up a camera in the way that I did. And I didn't even know any of these teachers. So a part of what I had to work through, and part of what, doing the course and looking at my mind was, the willingness to follow what the inspiration or what the guidance was, or course language would say what the Holy Spirit was asking me to do, was really the work involved in doing the documentary. And so in doing that, I also started to question what I was doing in life. And at the time, I was living in Los Angeles and working a job that I wasn't happy with. And so I was then, entertaining, okay, what was inspiring me? And what was inspiring me was this idea of quitting my job and moving to Hawaii. And so that became another opportunity to test the course, in the sense that the course really promises us that if we follow the Holy Spirit's guidance, regardless of what we're being asked to do, we will be supported along the way. And a lot of what we deal with in our lives is a lot of fear that seems to block us from the ability or capacity to be able to do what it is that we want to do, that we're inspired by, that is guided by the Holy Spirit. And so the true test of the course teaching is that we would step into those spaces with the Holy Spirit and make those choices and decisions, only to find that we will be supported. And so that was pretty much my journey in doing the movie, leaving LA, coming to Hawaii. But what I've learned now that I've been in Hawaii now for about 5 or 6 years, is maybe a little bit longer, is the journey doesn't stop. It's not like you get to one spot and all of a sudden you're done. It continues. And so it's this constant application of forgiveness, or this constant willingness to accept what the Holy Spirit has in store for you, and the willingness to let go of your own personal idea of what your life needs to be. That has been my journey. Because if you were to ask me at different moments, I can tell you in those moments what I think my life is supposed to be. And then in hindsight, recognize that it was never really that in the first place. So even coming to Hawaii, I remember getting here and feeling like, oh, I arrived. Like, in many people's mind, the idea of paradise is Hawaii. Hawaii is a symbol for paradise. And often people say to me, oh, you live in paradise. And I understand where they're coming from. But in my mind, I'm thinking, no, paradise is in the mind. So it doesn't matter where you're at. But it just so happens to be that I am in Hawaii, which is a symbol of paradise. But I share that to say that after arriving in Hawaii and after experiencing, okay, the joy of being here, life continues to happen. There's still, bills that come in the mail. There are still relationships to contend with. And so for me, Hawaii just became an extension of the practice. And, it's funny because a lot of what I was doing through the movie, through all the online retreats and the retreats we even had in Hawaii, you talked about MiracleShare, and a lot of the teaching that I was doing at the time, whether it be conferences or on YouTube or on the website, it seemed like at some point I hit a point in Hawaii where I had to pause some of the sharing and some of the teaching, because I had recognized that it was hard for me to share, because there was so many things that still had, what am I trying to say? What Hawaii did for me is help me recognize, going back to the point that I was making about paradise, is there was a point when I was here in Hawaii where it didn't feel like paradise, because life did continue, as I was explaining. And so I had to pause to address those things. In other words, I couldn't continue with A Course in Miracles the way I was sharing, because it wasn't authentic, because I wasn't dealing with whatever my path was showing me. And some of those things were relationship related. Some of those things were, I'll give you an example. We came out here, and I remember my first intention was to do all these retreats for A Course in Miracles, which I started to do. But the money wasn't coming in, which is something we often get entangled with in terms of living and life continuing. And I kept getting the thought of, well, you have these trees on your property. And so basically we had to shift gears from the retreats, because that wasn't happening, and focus on what we had growing here, which were trees. Now, we had no idea that trees would eventually be something that would provide some kind of financial assistance. But at the same time, as I shared with you before the call, someone had gifted me a wooden lathe, which is a tool used to make wood bowls and products. and I didn't understand it. And all I wanted to do was do a Course in Miracles, doing a Course in Miracles, share a Course in Miracles. Yet I was having all these different um, prompts and different inspirations and different ideas coming in from what the Course would say would be the Holy Spirit. Um, and I had to shift gears. And so what the journey was showing me was that you don't know what's best for you
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what I thought, what I needed to do. So I actually took a long pause from sharing. In fact, if you look at my YouTube channel, you probably won't see a video there for a few years. And so in that pause, the other thing that I realized is for a long time I had um, I felt very compelled to do a lot of social media stuff, which was hard to keep up with. And there was a certain level of dissatisfaction that was arising in me because I always felt like, I had to write something, I had to post something, I had to. Meanwhile, in the back of my mind was this voice saying, no, you got to focus on the trees, on your conservation. And I couldn't understand what that was. And I got the lathe. And so finally, and at the same time, I was also having challenges in my relationship, not being completely honest with myself in what was in my mind. It's so easy for me, and I'm sure a lot of people, to ignore a lot of what I say is blindsided thoughts and unconscious happenings. And I was doing that. I wasn't. And so long story short is that basically all came to a head for me, in which case I felt like I had no idea what I was doing and no direction. And I finally had to take the steps to say, you know what, forget the course in terms of how I was sharing and what I was doing. Follow the guidance, take care of the trees, get on a lathe, start working on wood. And through that listening, and also through the relationship work that the course is so eloquent in teaching us about, having no private thoughts, uncovering what was hidden, sharing what were some of my insecurities and concerns and so forth, by allowing that stuff to unfold and happen, what has happened so beautifully over the last couple of years is I now have a thriving wood business, in which case I sell a lot of the wood that comes from the conservation program that had been started a few years ago. And my life has changed in that sense. And so I feel like the Hawaii trip has deepened my understanding of the course principles because of some of the challenges that I faced here and some of the things that I had, in using course principles, had to apply to my experience. So I sit here with you, and just to recap is, I came from a place where I, wanted to find peace of mind and needed to find another way. I found another way. I was curious. I wrote, I spoke. And then life said, you know what, you got to pause for a moment and continue this training of following the Holy Spirit. And that's what my primary goal is and continues to be, is how do I continue to stay connected to really this guiding voice that ultimately knows what my best interest is. And it certainly isn't mine. And sometimes and I would say pretty much all the time, we don't know what anything is for. And in my case, I certainly thought the move to Hawaii was I knew what that was for. And in reality, I didn't. And so this journey continues with the same underlying principles of A Course in Miracles, including forgiveness.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And as you're sharing that, I was thinking, the other day in one of the groups, the quote came up about uh, we have no, basically that we're clueless, but I'm going to paraphrase as usually that, some of our greatest successes we've judged as failures and vice versa kind of thing, because we don't know. I mean, we judge everything on the basis of form and keep ourselves mindless and clueless that way. So I was thinking, in your specific case, your guidance may very well be to lathe wood and carry water, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. and certainly I was looking at your website with the wood artistry that you've done, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I'll put a link to it, and in the post that I make from this, but hopefully people will check it out. But it's really nice, along with some of these vintage Hawaii posters, and just some really nice things, and you've laid it out really beautifully. But it's that labor of love quality, I think, that permeates everything we do, that makes a difference. And the kindness and the care and the patience and gentleness, the form really isn't it. I mean, it's really about the content and the mind, and we have no idea if we try to assess that on the basis of form, do we? And it also is kind of tying into the idea that um, there was someone who once said something like the longest journey is from the head to the heart. And once we get the theory that we're in charge of our thoughts, and which of the two thought systems we're entertaining at any moment, we kind of, after a while, we kind of get the theory down, at least the basics, enough to where it's like, okay, now it's time to switch to the lab assignments. And the lab assignments inevitably are whatever's in front of your face on a given day, as our friend and colleague Gary Renard would say, is our forgiveness classroom, right? Yeah, really helpful, isn't it?
Yeah.
To not make a big deal about the form, and thinking that we have to do specific things or not do specific things, or it's such an easy well, it's really ego sabotage to think that, oh, well, it has to take this form or not take that form or whatever, and because we're all myopic here. We're all looking through a tiny little pinhole on a dream, at that. Yeah. So
Yeah, we
very
have
helpful.
these yeah, it's so easy to have these ideas and fantasies about who we are and what we need to do and what we need to be and what's ideal and what's right, and all those thoughts just seem to serve the purpose of keeping an identity of a person and an ego,
Mhm.
and the willingness to just and it's, in my experience, it it creeps in, and the willingness is this constant willingness to let it go, even with the wood or with my store and the outline, because there's thoughts of I need to do more of that, or I need to
Mhm.
do it differently, or this needs to change, or there needs to be more of this or less of that. Like, there's still all this stuff. And to your point, it's like, how do I remove myself from the form, and just be here with the content of what is in my mind and be at peace with it? How do I, and it's this constant prayer back to the Holy Spirit, back to, being led. None of it, all those thoughts don't matter when I'm being led, because when you're being led, you're not questioning, you're letting the Holy Spirit decide for you. So I can forgive, which the Course in some spots will say is to overlook. I can overlook that thinking or those thoughts and just be led,
Exactly.
and then see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. It really is just, patiently observing, looking and waiting and judging, not as the what is forgiveness essay in the workbook suggests. Just noticing how easy it is to want to assess things on the basis of misinterpretations of the ego, and just be willing to maybe question those a little more, and find that there's some peace behind that. Yeah. Interestingly enough, you used the word overlook. When my wife Nancy and I moved to the Oregon coast about 3.5 years ago, it was not lost on me that the street address of this house that our neighbors found for us, that we immediately fell in love with and moved into, was on Overlook Drive. So every time I see that sign, it's like, oh yeah, there's two ways of overlooking. There's the ego's overlooking, which is basically, overlooking the contents of the mind, and having it, admonish us to don't go there. You don't want to look in your mind. And Holy Spirit says, yeah, go ahead and look, and then you'll see that there's nothing to get hung about, as the Beatles said. Right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
my favorite definition of forgiveness in A Course in Miracles is to watch without judgment,
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
because it gives us permission to watch the thoughts without getting caught up in the thoughts. So it's not like, I used to be really hard on myself about what I was thinking. So if I would have like these thoughts of what should be better or these thoughts of assessing, I used to be hard on myself because I thought, oh, this is not what I should be doing. But the thought, this is not what I should be doing, is also egoic. So I like the idea of watching without judgment because it allows for the thoughts to come, because they're gonna come, and allow them to come. But there's can identify with a deeper awareness that can watch it without reacting to it, without giving it meaning, without interpreting it any further.
Mhm.
So that's my, and I think it's like the easiest definition of forgiveness for
That's a
me.
that's
It's
a
watch without judgment.
really good working definition, isn't it? Yeah. As you're sharing that, I was thinking that's kind of a generalization of something that Ken Wapnick said in regard to, I think it was lesson 93, where he points out that there's a pause where he says, if you can just notice your tendency to want to judge yourself, for example, in the resistance to not doing what the course suggests, and in this case, the specific example was, you know, mindlessly forgetting to do the workbook lessons, right? That was basically, while you're doing the workbook, the whole idea is to be more mindful and just notice, like you're saying. So, in that lesson is something about, we must be willing to forgive our lapses. And so Ken's comment on that was, the way to do the workbook perfectly is to do it imperfectly and then forgive yourself, or to notice how much you're unwilling to listen to the Holy Spirit, and notice the fight, the inner fight that the ego puts up, and just watch it without having to jump into the battle, with it, kind of thing, and do not fight yourself. Yeah.
That is like a great lesson, and you reminded me when I first started doing the course, and I hear this a lot from people. Is I remember I would start, excited. I would like do lesson 1, 2, 3, and I get to about 30, and then it was done. I'd forgotten about it. Weeks would go by, and then I would think, oh boy, so much time has gone by. Let me start all over, and I'll do this again. And I'd start at number 1, and then I'd probably get as hard as 40 or 50. I mean, I started and stopped the course too many times to remember.
Mhm.
And finally, I got to the point where I said, you know what? I am no longer going to start and stop. I'm just going to start, and if I forget, I'll pick up where I left off. That was the only way I can get through it. And sure enough, the moment I decided that I was going to be okay if I missed or skipped, was the series of lessons that I took that I did not miss, and I completed the whole course. It's
Mhm.
just like when I was willing to like let that go, the Holy Spirit came and said, "Okay, I'll support you through it." But it
Exactly.
was this letting go of the judgment of the start and stop that really helped me complete it.
Yeah, letting go of that self-concept, the self-condemnation, you know, the inner saboteur, if you will, of that crazy thought system that says, I'm limited to this little tiny, point in space and time, and its story and its body and its little puppet drama, and and if we can just watch that, and not in a derisive way, but just gently watch that and say, oh yeah, there goes Bruce's storyline again, and like a little ticker tape, and I like the ticker tape metaphor. It's like the ego's blather is sort of like a 24/7 commentary on its judgment and condemnations of everything that's happening, and that it likes, and not happening that it would like to have happened. And if we can just kind of say, oh yeah, I, I don't have to invest my identity and my peace in that. So there's one line in the Song of Prayer that I really like. This to me is like the cliff notes. It's sort of like, if I can only remember one quote from that, is the secret of true prayer is to forget the things you think you need. And I really find that one helpful, because it kind of ties into what you were just sharing, Craig. Because it's like, if you can just remember to watch the ego's interpretation of everything and not judge it, and not condemn yourself and not make a big deal and not, mentally thrash around and make a big production out of it. Um, that's progress, if we can do that just a little bit more each time, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the suffering comes from that story. I call it an interpretation, whatever you want to call it, is this constant commentary about Craig's life and what's right and what's wrong and what Craig should be doing or not doing, and all of that. There's no part of that that is true, although it is very tempting to believe that it is the case. And certainly, I stand here to say that I just like anybody else fall into the trap of believing in the story, and I understand the practicality too, because there is an engagement with others, seeming others that we have, and so we're constantly bombarded by this story. But even if the lesson isn't generalized, the reality with the capital R is that story, regardless of how it's told, when it's told, is not real. It is not reality. So the willingness, even if it's not completely apparent at the moment to me, but the willingness, which is what the course is always asking us at minimal to be able to do, is to say, you know what? I seem to be believing this experience. I seem to be thinking that this is what reality is, but I'm willing to accept that it's not. And that is all that we're required to do. So if even if our only mantra was that this kind of like this willingness to be wrong, which I always liked personally, this idea. It certainly doesn't feel good from an egoic perspective to be wrong, but just adapting this idea that I am wrong about everything. I am wrong about everything. And good news, the good news is my suffering comes from when I think I'm being right about things. That's where the disappointment comes from. That's where the thought is right now coming to me is the thought of planning. When I plan, there's a thought of righteousness that this is what is going to make me happy, or this is what needs to happen. And again, if I'm willing to say I'm wrong, then I'm willing to realize that, or be accepting of the fact that my plans do not work out the way I typically plan it. And I don't think they do for anybody. But again, it's just this constant, willingness to give up that the story, the commentary in our mind about what the world is, who am I, and who others are as well.
Yeah. As you're sharing that, I was thinking, I think it was John Lennon who said, it might have been in one of his songs, I think, the lyrica, life is what happens while you're making other plans, but, obviously he's, from a course perspective, it's our dreams keep going regardless of whatever, but it's that willingness, like you say, the little willingness to just be willing to question, maybe this isn't the real experience, if it involves anything that's less than peaceful, huh? Yeah. So what else? What else has been, because we haven't really talked really much for a few years actually, and you've shared a lot of the things about the woodworking and a lot of the introspective. Are there any other topics that have crossed your mind over the last few years, I suppose, or things that you're reflecting on the last few months with the global situation, or we can talk about a lot of things, but just thought I'd open it up to
Yeah.
what might be of interest and inspiring you presently.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of things that have certainly been on my mind that I've been given to work with. I think, from an introspective standpoint, just an incredible humbling on my part, just feeling very humble, from the standpoint of for me, having done the course, spending a lot of time with the course, having an intellectual understanding of the course, not like some like scholarly intellectual understanding, but just an understanding of the course that I hadn't had before, led me to believe that somehow I did know something, which is really contradicting the reality that Craig really can't know anything. And so, but when in my situation, when I found that I could intellectually understand the course, I took that to believe that somehow that meant that my lessons were generalized. In other words, I may know something about what the course is teaching and what the course is saying, but is the lesson really generalized? And meaning, am I really at the place where I can, experientially, know what it means to have no private thoughts? Like, am I willing to expose all of them if I had to? Do I really, certainly I have, I have faith that everything's going to be okay in any situation, and that's what I would tell anybody. But do I still experience fear? Well, if I do, which I do, then there's still unconscious healing or there are thoughts that are unconscious or beliefs that are unconscious that still need healing. So even though I may understand intellectually what the course is saying, I can intellectually understand that, yes, you will always be taken care of, right? That doesn't mean that that is absolute in my experience. And so over the last couple of years, really getting real with that and accepting that and understanding that and acknowledging that, which is, not keeping that hidden or allowing that to surface. That has been a big part of my last few years. And certainly part of, kind of stepping back from sharing and teaching. The other piece is, you brought up the example of this whole COVID thing. How am I personally affected by it? On a deep level, I'm not affected by it, but on a practical level, I am. Craig did have thoughts and plans. I had plans to travel. I was supposed to be at the Course in Miracles conference in Los Angeles in May.
Same here.
I was supposed to open up a new store for my wood shop. I was supposed to, I have a job that I was holding. I was supposed to quit that one. There's all these things that were laid out on the timeline, and the rug is kind of pulled from underneath. But simultaneously, as a result of doing A Course in Miracles, as a result of adapting these principles that we are talking about, when those things happen, there isn't a sense of getting lost in it. So it's not like I can get lost in complaining about it. It's not like I can get lost in being a victim about it. I have to continue with what I was saying earlier, is applying these principles that I know work. And forgiveness being a part of that, and being able to watch the thoughts of, oh my God, I'm not going to LA. Watch the thoughts of, oh my God, I can't open up that new store that I wanted to open up. Watch the thoughts without judgment, meaning there isn't like, my life sucks, or it's not like, oh, I can't do this, or it's watching those thoughts without that, without the judgment in it. And so, that's been how I've been applying it. As I watch it, I also recognize that what a beautiful opportunity it's like all this stuff is surfacing. So even, I remember being at one point during this COVID experience, hearing and experiencing, hearing from others talk about how they were going crazy at home, or, they needed to do something, or they were dealing with, not being productive. And I certainly have felt some of those things, but what that allowed me to do is say, oh, the reason why I don't feel good because I'm not being productive is because, oh, I don't feel worthy. I thought that the more productive that I was meant the more worthy I am. Oh, that's why I feel right now, because I'm not doing something that somehow I'm unworthy. So that presents itself an opportunity to look at that. Wow, I never thought about that. Or, yesterday I was thinking about something where, someone had asked, or the question was, how's your day, or how was your day? And, the old me would have, thought for a moment, well, how productive was I that day? That would determine how my day was. Oh, it was great. I got to go to the bank and take care of this issue. I took care of that. It was a great day. The other way of looking at it is how was your day was, was I at peace? And that
That's a
is
pretty
a
quick checklist, isn't it?
yeah, done. Was I at peace? Could there be a different goal? The irony is that you look at your productive day thinking that having gotten those things done, I can finally be at peace.
A friend of
And
mine.
so
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, a friend of mine, Dave Van Dyke, who I've known since 7th grade, recently gave a little presentation for the Rocky Mountain Miracle Center. He made a little flow chart, and for us nerdy engineer types. And in the flow chart, it was like, "Am I at peace? Yes, no." The little diamond in the cliche flow chart. And it's like, okay, if I'm not at peace, then I'm going to keep recycling, and unless I choose Holy Spirit, I'm going to keep recycling that thought system. But if I am at peace, then okay, then good to go. but that's always that decision point is do we want to choose the teacher of peace? And we're always at that juncture in every moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think COVID does that. It gives us this wonderful opportunity to look at it. And what other purpose can COVID serve other than to help us look at what is blocking us from peace?
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly, between COVID and a lot of things that seemingly are happening in the world that reflect conflict, that reflect, disagreement. You have the mask wearers and the people who don't want to wear masks. You have the people who are, protesting, and you have the people who are anti the protesting. So you have this conflict going on, but what we're invited to do is to kind of go deeper than the conflict and ask the questions of what's really happening. And it's basically, I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago at the local Unity Church, is like, you got the mask wearers who feel strongly that everybody should wear masks. That is, what's logical. That is what's proven to protect us. And it is, based, that strong position or positionality is based on a fear of catching a virus. Then you have the opposite, which is, no, I shouldn't be told what to do, and I should not have to wear a mask, and I don't believe in the virus threat, and I do not want my freedom taken away. And so at the core of that argument is this fear of the argument, the fear of the freedom being taken away. And so you have this, so what seems like conflicting position
Right.
underneath is the same issue,
You've stated
which
it very
is
eloquently.
fear.
Yes. Exactly that. Exactly.
And
Yeah. It's never so blind. Nothing is so blinding as perception of form, meaning the form is really the two sides, but really, it's a false difference. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and so it's so from a course standpoint, or from a non-dual perspective,
Mm-hmm.
if we can watch the everything without judgment, if we're in a position of feeling like we need to wear masks, can we watch that thought and that propensity without judgment? It doesn't mean that you don't wear a mask. Whether you wear one or not is irrelevant. You wear whatever you're guided to wear, and if you're not guided to wear, you're not guided to wear. But if you can just watch the thinking, that's where the healing comes. I don't know in terms of, what you should do in terms of wear a mask or not wear a mask. Certainly I have thoughts about it, but even those thoughts are not reality. They're not, those are still egoic thoughts, and they're still part of the complicated story that's always going through my mind. But at the heart of it is, is do what's guided. And when you're just doing as guided and you're watching without judgment, you can also watch others who seemingly oppose our decisions. You can watch them without judgment. You take the whole protest, the same principle. You have those who, again, underlying fear on both sides. When we start to look at those underlying fears and start to inspect them, we start to see that the cause of these issues are based in fear. and we can address them together. We can come to an understanding. Of course, the miracle says that, that which is lacking is what we're not extending. When we question the fears and we try to extend understanding, we too experience the effects of that understanding as well. And so for me, that's what I aim to practice when I come across a Facebook post that certainly charges me because it opposes what some of my thinking is, or I may see a conspiracy theory on Facebook, or I may see someone outside. How do I take what I just shared and embody that thought, which is withdrawing from the battlefield, and go above the battlefield and watch without judgment with the Holy Spirit. And I think COVID is certainly giving us a big invitation to do that.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I was thinking recently about the, I think it's a Oriental ideogram of uh, crisis and opportunity being the same thing, or something like that. Whereas, basically, and I think it was danger and opportunity, or there's a symbol for crisis, something like that. Anyway, but it's basically, it all boils down to which thought system are we working from, the fear and really the guilt that feeds that, which is based on the idea that something happened, the belief in separation. And just as you were sharing, it's I mean, on the level of form, sure, do what makes you feel safe, and use the magic, use the just even drinking water and breathing is all magic. So I think it's helpful to not try to notice the level of confusion, and not use the course's metaphysics to avoid doing common sense, but at the same time recognize that if there's a fear there, that's something that we can look at with Holy Spirit, and like you're sharing, see that we're really all the same, and that we're all
Yeah.
working with those same two thought systems and the decision making faculty that constantly, moment to moment to moment, is going back and forth between those. And hopefully eventually we'll choose the thought system of peace, and independent of what we do, whether we're on a Zoom call, or in front of a lathe, or talking to friends, or watching TV, and noticing our reaction to news stories, or whatever, right?
Oh yeah, trust me. There are many times I'm in front of the lathe,
Yeah.
and whew, a lot is revealed. My level of impatience, there's times when I'll be working on the lathe, and I'll sense there's something going wrong, and I'll ignore it because from an ego standpoint, it's all about the end. So in the process of making something, which can take hours if not days, and sometimes longer, the ego's way of producing product or making some form of art is to get to the end, to be able to say, look what I made, look how beautiful this is. It's like, I did this. This is like the ego taking accountability for this, this wonderful, beautiful thing that was made. I did this. And so in the process of making things, I've learned from the ego standpoint, the ego just wants to get to the end. And so what'll happen is I will find myself getting to, because I'm not in the moment with the process and allowing to be guided with the Spirit, I'll allow myself to cut corners. I'll get frustrated, and I'll get to the end with a disappointing product, or get mad because some flaw drives me crazy. So I share this because the lathe, just being alone with the lathe and my tools and my woodworking, there are so many lessons, that I'm shown, and the invitation, like, can I be with the process, and can the means be the end? Can I be at peace with what I'm doing in the moment? And without regard to what the end is going to be like, whatever the end product is, can I be at peace? And ultimately, it has to be that if I'm at peace with the means, whatever the ends is going to be fine, you know, because it comes out of peace.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think pointing out that, you know, no matter what is going on, it could be COVID, not COVID, by yourself. And that's quite honestly what I think a lot of people are dealing with when we talk about the COVID situation. A lot of people are forced to be by themselves. And that brings up a whole bunch of complexities and issues that we're not used to because we're so filled with, you know, social engagements, work, and so forth. But being alone, yeah, it's like you're just with your mind there. No, very less distractions, less people to blame. That was the first thing I learned about Hawaii. Uh, is you when you just have the trees and the cows and you don't have people to blame, you start to blame the trees and the cows, and you quickly realize, wait,
What?
I'm going off the far end here.
The goatscape becomes the goats, right? Instead of
Exactly.
the mind, right? Oh, that's
So
good. That's
true.
really good. Yeah, yeah. That whole introspective opportunity, you know, it certainly would be easy, you know, for us to think of it as a challenge, and you know, perhaps rightly so. But at the same time, like you say, you know, if we use this with Holy Spirit's guidance to really look more deeply at the contents of our mind, what a golden opportunity, really. I mean, and like you were talking about a few moments ago, you know, looking at the worthiness factor of the kind of that Puritan work ethic of thinking, well, I have to, you know, check so many items off my list. In your case, it's probably a Craigslist, right? Yeah, bad pun. But you know, yeah, we all have these goals that we have for ourselves, usually on a daily basis, if not, you know, more granular than that. And if we just kind of can laugh at that and say, oh yeah, well, if I don't get this done, okay, or you know, if we, you know, do more things than we thought we were going to do, is that better or worse? Not necessarily. There's a friend of mine who Leonard Lasko, who's a forgiveness teacher. He's not a course teacher per se, predominantly, but he knows of it, and but he shared something in some of his workshops that I helped with some years ago that I thought was really helpful. Is that, you know, our real identity, our real being, our real worth, and really the course would say our real innocence is not anything that we have to earn or learn. I like the rhyme there. That, you know, it's intrinsic, and we all have it, and we all in truth share it, even though we probably cover it over far more than we realize. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's really helpful to just kind of look at all the things that we, you know, judge ourselves about, and just be willing to question, have the little willingness to say, am I needlessly, you know, punishing, torturing, or otherwise not being nice to, you know, this mind by, you know, placing undue burdens on it. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess we could say any burden is undue burden. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, in recently, I've been thinking about, you know, the unconscious guilt that is you know, one of the focuses of Course in Miracles, and how, you know, a lot of it is really looked. You know, a lot of the emphasis of the course is helping us to use Holy Spirit's vision to look at that. Um, and then I think is what the other adjective that I like to put in front of the the unconscious is the unfounded, because once we look at it with the Holy Spirit, we see there's nothing there. from a you know, an eternal perspective, which is what the now moment kind of gives us a glimpse into. It's like there's no cause for. You were talking about cause and effect a few moments ago. There's no cause for that. We've made up cause, but it's not true. And when we see that it's not true, it's like, why should I, you know, as Shakespeare would say, beat myself up for much ado about nothing? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's habitual. You know, it's funny. What was coming to my mind is I do a to-do list, and I've gotten to a place where I don't even know what the to-do list is for, because I don't necessarily do what's on the to-do list, nor do I necessarily accomplish what's on the to-do list, but I do a to-do list. But it's not even like I don't like wake up thinking I gotta do a to-do list. I'll be sitting on my computer and I'll just jot down all the things that would be great to kind of do,
Mhm.
and then I will go about my day, and I may do nothing on it. And I
Mhm.
would,
Mhm.
I may feel like, oh, you know what? I feel like doing this, which wasn't on the list,
Mhm.
and I do that, and I become okay with that. Whereas in the past, I would do a to-do list and really judge myself. There's the
Right.
thought of judging of, how well did I do to my to-do list? Um, you know, and so I think through this process, for me, I've just become desensitized to the to-do list.
Mhm.
But I still do it. And who knows, maybe one day I won't do it. I don't know, but it just happens and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
the habit of beating ourselves up would take that information and say there's something wrong.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, because I think it kind of ties into the idea that that in my mind the whole purpose of the course is to lead us to the point where we implicitly trust that inner guidance, trust that Holy Spirit, and be willing to, spontaneously and responsively um, do whatever's needed at any given moment. And so having a rigid, dogmatic, ritualistic, got to do this now, got to not do that then kind of approach is really contrary to that. Even though in the early workbook lessons, or the intro, I think it talks about how because our minds are so undisciplined, we initially need some kind of structure in order to notice how undisciplined our minds are. But eventually, once we start implicitly trusting that guidance and feel the peace of that, it's like, oh yeah, I can afford to do that consistently, and then just follow the peace to whatever I happen to be seeming to be doing on the level of form. Huh? Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered some pretty good ground here. I'm sure there's tons of other things that would be fascinating to talk about, but we've gone about an hour now, I guess. Any parting words or anything that you'd like to share with people? I'll put the links to your websites on the posts I make from this conversation, and so people can check out what you're doing and where you've gone, where you've been, and where you're, all that good stuff.
Well,
and
thank you. I appreciate it. This is coming and for me in a good time because I feel like, and I've shared this with you, having, spent the last few years, you've been wonderful, by the way. You've helped, support me with my website. And you've been kind of with me to see the changes on it. And quite honestly, I am starting afresh and anew. And that is what now is inspiring me, is to getting back to some sharing. There's truly nothing. I could talk about wood, I could talk about Hawaii, I could talk about a lot of things, but there's truly nothing more that I enjoy, nothing more that I enjoy than contemplating and sharing these principles of A Course in Miracles, and quite honestly of universal spiritual truths. Even if you're not a Course in Miracles student, a lot of these principles still resonate, and certainly there are other paths and forms of what the Course is teaching. So there's nothing that I enjoy more. So in my experience right now, as we share here, I can say that it feels like I'm moving towards a resurgence of more sharing.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly what that will look like. Something tells me that it'll probably look a little different than before, but we'll see what that looks like. So I appreciate the opportunity to get on a call with you and to share today. So thank you so much. It's a joy to join with you.
Very much likewise, Craig, and thanks for taking the time. So, I guess I'll wrap it up there, unless you have anything further. So anyway, thanks again. Really appreciate taking the time.